Imagine for a second that you've just been handed a massive promotion. Your household income has doubled overnight. You're finally bringing in two full salaries instead of one. You'd think that would be the moment all your financial stress disappears, right? You'd have more savings, more freedom, and a massive safety net. But what if I told you that for millions of families, that second income is actually the very thing making them more vulnerable to total financial ruin? What if the double income dream is actually a trap that leaves you with less breathing room than your parents had on a single paycheck 50 years ago? It sounds completely backwards, but the math doesn't lie. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on why two incomes might be leaving you broker than one. And trust me, by the end of this, you'll never look at your bank account the same way again. Welcome back to Alex Talks Finance. Today, we're diving into a concept that sounds like a conspiracy theory, but is actually a documented economic phenomenon known as the two-income trap. We've been told for decades that the secret to a better life is for both partners to work. We thought more money would mean more security. But instead, the opposite has happened. The modern middle-class family is more likely to go bankrupt today than a similar family was in the 1970s. We're working twice as hard, but we're standing on thinner ice. So how did we get here? Why is it that despite having two people in the workforce, families feel more squeezed than ever? Let's break down the hidden mechanics of this trap, and more importantly, figure out how you can escape it. To understand why we're struggling today, we have to look back at the old normal of the 1970s. Back then, the typical middle-class family lived on one income. Now, I'm not saying those times were perfect or that people were rolling in cash, but they had something we've completely lost, a massive built-in safety net. Think about it. If the father was the sole breadwinner and he got sick or lost his job, the family had a spare worker, the mother. She could step into the workforce to bridge the gap. They also had a lot of flexible expenses. If things got tight, they could cut back on groceries or skip a vacation. Their fixed costs, the things they absolutely had to pay every month, like the mortgage, were a much smaller percentage of their income. Fast forward to today, and the landscape has shifted entirely. Now, in most households, both parents are working full-time. On the surface, it looks like they have more money. But here's the catch. That second income didn't go into a savings account. It got swallowed up by a massive bidding war. You see, when every family suddenly had two incomes, they all started competing for the same limited resources. The biggest one? A house in a safe neighborhood with a good school district. Because everyone had more money to spend, the price of those houses skyrocketed. Families weren't buying bigger mansions, they were just paying twice as much for the same three-bedroom house their parents bought on one salary.
This is where the trap starts to snap shut. Because housing prices rose so much, families had to take on massive mortgages. To pay those mortgages, they both have to work. And because they both work, they now have new, unavoidable expenses that the 1970s family didn't have. They need two cars to get to two different jobs. They have to pay for professional childcare, which in many cities costs as much as a second mortgage. They have to pay for preschool, after-school care, and higher taxes because they're in a higher bracket. Now, think about the safety net we talked about. In a two-income household today, that net is gone. Both parents are already working at full capacity. If one person loses their job, the family loses 50% of its income instantly. But here's the terrifying part. Their fixed costs, the mortgage, the car payments, the insurance, are based on having two incomes. They can't just cut back on the cable bill to survive. They are one layoff or one medical emergency away from losing everything. They have twice the income, but they have zero flexibility. They are all in every single month. Now, think about this. Have you ever felt like no matter how much you earn, your bank balance stays the same? That's because of something called lifestyle creep. But in the two-income trap, it's actually mandatory creep. It's not that you're buying more designer shoes, though that can happen. It's that the cost of participating in the middle class has become a pay-to-play system. To get your kid into a decent school, you have to live in a certain zip code. To live in that zip code, you need 2 incomes. To have 2 incomes, you need 2 cars and expensive daycare. It's a cycle that feeds itself, leaving you with less discretionary income at the end of the month than a single-income family had 50 years ago. Let's look at the numbers for a second. In the early 70s, the average family spent about 14% of their income on their mortgage. Today, that number often clears 35% or even 50% in major cities. When you add in the cost of health insurance, which has outpaced inflation for decades, and the cost of cars and education, you realize that the modern family is fixed cost heavy. In the past, if a family hit a rough patch, they could survive because their must-pay bills were low. Today, the must-pay bills consume almost everything. We aren't being greedy, we're being squeezed by a system where the floor of middle-class life has become incredibly expensive. So why does this matter to you right now? It matters because understanding this trap is the first step toward reclaiming your freedom. We often blame ourselves for not being better with money. We think, we make 6 figures, why are we struggling? But the reality is that the game has been rigged by these rising fixed costs. You aren't failing, you're just playing a very difficult version of the game. Now, let's talk about the T's I mentioned earlier. How do you actually beat this? How do you have 2 incomes without falling into the trap? The secret isn't just saving more. It's about changing the way you structure your entire life. Imagine if you and your partner decided to live entirely on one salary and use the second salary strictly for wealth building and debt elimination. Imagine the power you would have. If one of you lost a job, it wouldn't be a crisis, it would just be a temporary pause in your savings plan. That is true financial security. But achieving that requires a radical shift in mindset. It means potentially living in a smaller house than you can afford according to the bank. It means driving older cars even though your coworkers are all leasing new SUVs. It means looking at every fixed cost and asking yourself, is this a necessity or is this a trap?
Think about the psychological pressure of the modern world. We are constantly bombarded with images of what a successful life looks like. We see the big house, the organic grocery hauls, and the expensive vacations. But what those images don't show is the stress behind the scenes. They don't show the late-night arguments about credit card bills or the fear that one downsizing memo at work could end it all. The 2-income trap isn't just a financial problem, it's a mental health crisis. We are exhausted because we are running a race that has no finish line. So, here is my challenge to you. Sit down this weekend and look at your fixed costs, not your Netflix subscription or your Starbucks habit. Those are small potatoes. Look at the big stuff, your rent or mortgage, your car payments, your insurance, and your childcare. What percentage of your total take-home pay do those items consume? If that number is over 50%, you are in the trap. You are living on the edge regardless of how much you earn. The goal shouldn't be to just make more money. The goal should be to increase the gap between what you earn and what you must spend. That gap is where your freedom lives. That gap is what allows you to say no to a toxic boss, to take a risk on a new business, or to stay home with a sick child without panicking about the mortgage. As we wrap this up, I want you to remember one thing. The most expensive thing you can buy is not a house or a car, it's your peace of mind. Our parents' generation had it, not because they were richer, but because they were less vulnerable. We can get that back, but it requires us to stop competing in the bidding war. It requires us to redefine what enough looks like. If this video opened your eyes to why you might be feeling the squeeze, do me a favor and share it with someone who needs to hear this. We're all in this together, trying to navigate a financial world that's changing faster than we can keep up with. But by understanding the math and the history behind the 2-income trap, you can start making choices that lead to actual wealth, not just the appearance of it. The path to financial freedom isn't always about adding more.
Sometimes it's about realizing that the more you have, the more you have to lose, unless you build a foundation that can't be shaken. Think about your life. Are you working for your money, or is your money working for your life? It's time to stop falling for the trap and start building a future that actually belongs to you. Thanks for watching Alex Talks Finance, and I'll see you in the next one.